So, Bitcoin. Nice move to the upside, yeah? It's been a tricky day today. They've been doing these Chinese talks in London, and it's been one of those, do you expect them to give you a result today? But unfortunately, those talks have now been postponed to tomorrow. So, come on, man. You're either going to do a deal or not. But Trump is speaking right now as we do this live stream, and he's been talking a little bit about the trade deal, saying that things are okay, we're getting good progress, but doing a deal with China is hard. But you got to understand, the thing that they are talking about is going to dictate whether or not money from the money markets is going to plow into the stock market. So $7.5 trillion is stuck in the ETF markets, and investors are looking for direction. On top of that, Trump hasn't shied away from demanding a 100 basis point cut on the interest rates. That's a full percentage point. So traders were expecting 4.25, 4.5%. He wants 3.25, 3.5%. Do you understand what would happen the moment the Fed were to do such a thing? There would be whipsaw price action across the board. Investors would wet the bed. They would be looking to just quickly grab onto anything. The markets would rocket. Everything will be completely wild. Parabolic? Nah, ladies and gentlemen. It will just be exploding out of your screens. You won't know what to do. The last time the Federal Reserve did something like this, they did it for the worse, which ended up becoming the Bond Massacre of 1974. But if they were to cut going into next week's meeting, I mean, boy, it undermines them. It really does. Because they're stuck with their 2% mandated target of inflation. Now, the reading's coming out on Wednesday, and they're expecting it to be 2.5%. That's not looking good. But by some miracle, Trump can get the Fed to cut rates. I mean, ain't going to be happening with your boy Jerome. Anyways, tonight, I'm going to go through a couple of things, break it all down, get you in line with what you need to know about going into Asia tonight, because it's been a very tricky day. Stock market has been absolutely wild. I took some trades today. I'm going to explain to you my logic on that, and didn't make much at all because it was somewhat concerning given that this trade talk with China, they could come out and say, yep, we've got a deal. And then all of a sudden the market just explodes and you want to try and capture that move. But when you've got pending news coming out, it can be very difficult. And NASDAQ today has just been bouncing around its VWAP. It hasn't done anything. And I didn't expect it to do that so tightly. But look, we're waiting for data to come out. We're waiting for a deal or no deal. But crypto, on the other hand, Bitcoin. Nice flavorsome move to the upside, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to break this down. But primarily, what we've got to focus on is what's going on, and that's hitting the markets and grabbing attention. Listen, this trade deal is very important. It says here, Trump eyes easing U.S. chip export restrictions to secure Chinese rare earths. Now, Trump's been effectively saying, look, we're going to cap this, we're going to cap this. NVIDIA's been given limitations. He's cost NVIDIA nearly $5.5 billion because of this export on chips. So now Trump's coming to the table and saying, well, look, we'll remove that just so we can take advantage of your rare earth, because if you start increasing the cost of these rare earths just to get back at us, it's not going to be a good thing for our dearly beloved tech market. NVIDIA won't like that at all because they will simply mark up the cost of their goods. And that's going to be a problem for a lot of tech companies. If NVIDIA's marking up prices, every other company is going to come into play and do exactly the same thing. But where do you think people are going to go for the product? They're going to go to NVIDIA, not other companies. You might as well just pay for the best rather than paying a company that's going to be charging more as well for their product. It's quite a catastrophic event if there is no agreement in place with regards to rare earth metals. Remember, a few years ago, China did put a cap on exports of rare earth metals by 60%. So they inflated the price of those rare earth metals, which was a problem for trade in the United States. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, just the bigger picture overall is, of course, the China trade talks. Now, they're saying that It has been extended going into tomorrow. So we're going to know more about what is going to happen going into that meeting tomorrow. Luckily enough, it's going to be on time frames that I can work with, because it's very unlikely they're going to be talking in the middle of the night. So we don't have to worry about any surprises in the Asian session tonight. But Asian session tonight will, of course, absorb what has happened today. Quickly going into it, we've got some very interesting news about this 100 basis point rate cut. So he's calling for 100 basis points to be cut by next week. I personally believe that if the inflation data comes in lower than what they're expecting, we could actually get a significant rate cut. We could even get one much sooner. And I know it's like 8 days away. If we just look at it, you've got here that the meeting takes place in 8 days' time. Make sure you like, subscribe, because that's the biggest live that we do on this channel. But the expectation is that they're going to keep rates at the same level that we've got. But if the data comes out, you go, look, 99.9%, we're keeping the rates as they are. But if we get data on Wednesday, that is less than 2.5%, and we edge close towards that 2.2, I think the Fed will likely cut, man. You know, Trump's got a civil war happening in California. Like, it's not a civil war, but he wants to avoid a civil war, to say the least. But he's getting sued by California now because he called in the army as such. But nothing to be too concerned about with that. Other news, check this out. This is important, okay? Because you've got to ask yourself, who's funding it? So he's going to be bringing out this Trump savings account. So in other words, you get $1,000 if you give birth to a child within, wait a second, it says here, the proposal calls for Treasury Department to fund $1,000 in investment accounts for children born in the US between January the 1st, 2025 and January the 1st, 2029. So they say kids are expensive, but if you start having kids, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get yourself $1,000, but unfortunately you'll get the cash up front and then you're going to end up paying it in your taxes. But he's cutting taxes, but at the same time, you're going to have to pay for that, which is why Elon is so cheesed off about the big, great bill that Trump wants to put forward. The deficit's just going to fly up. It's great. Look, encouraging you all to get laid and have children. Happy days. You get paid to have kids. That is brilliant, you know? But you got to remember, Elon, I'm not even going to say it, but I think this is because of Elon, in my opinion. Because Elon's like, you know, we've got a depopulation coming into play. We need more people to have more kids. And I think that's something that he may have influenced, but that's just me speculating right now. Anyways, speaking of which, did you hear about this bad boy here? Paraguay's President X promotes Bitcoin likely hack. So it was nice, you know, to make it legal tender. Not bad, but, you know, I wish they could just hack the Federal Reserve's account. Could you imagine? Buy Bitcoin. You wouldn't even believe it anyway. But the hype of it would be absolutely divine. Speaking of which, Tesla hit by 2 downgrades. That's bad news, because Tesla's market cap is very, very strong, which can have an impact on cryptocurrency overall. But you can see the market's not even budging for it. That's S&P. Quickly going over into Tesla, downgrade doesn't mean anything to them. They're just glad that he's back at work. That's the one thing they're happy about. So when you're looking at Tesla and you're looking at the bigger market and then you're looking at cryptocurrency, you've got to say to yourself, well, when you've got such a big heavyweight getting a downgrade, okay, that can put weight on the marketplace. He only fell out with Trump a few days ago and it sank 15%. They're making a recovery back up, ladies and gentlemen. This was just an opportunity to buy it on the cheap. They're going to start rallying to the upside. Now, with that being said, quickly going over into Bitcoin price action, just to put it into perspective, who'd made money today? I'd like to know if you guys have made some change today. We did relatively well today with the setups, but it was so fast today. So I put out these setups earlier on Bitcoin. I wanted to see Bitcoin clear 108,787. We ended up getting 108,758. However, the problem is the entry, just before I finished posting the video for this, because what I do is I put a video and then I do the setup, okay? I had to reevaluate the actual entry because it was all the way down here. And I said that if you get an expectation of a break towards this 106,505, then we're effectively looking for price to go up to the upside. But at the end of the New York live stream, I gave them this logic on understanding how to exploit the midpoint of the range. And I wanted to see them mark price down after the New York live and then effectively make the reversal to the upside. So they did it with Solana and they did it with Ethereum. Okay, so that was what the logic was on that setup. And if you just have a look, Solana touched it beautifully. Look at this. What a perfect move. This is exactly what I mean about waiting for the retrace. Okay, rise, retrace, continuation to the upside. Look how they just touched that midpoint of the range. Okay, it was just, it's a perfect play. Perfect play right there, okay? But the setup overall for the day in the sense of Solana, if we go into it, all right, we were in line with the setup to break up to the upside, wanted to see Solana clear out the 160 mark, but we effectively end up getting the 157. But it was the fact that it was such a sharp retrace reversal to the upside. If you guys capitalized on that, Platinum members, if you managed to take advantage of that, happy days. But I think Bitcoin gave you a nice, decent entry at the 106. It would have been inside of this range right here. You got a very short retrace, continuation to the upside. Then you've got this retrace right here, and then continuation up. So that setup pretty much worked nicely for the guys who trade Bitcoin. But it was hard because Bitcoin was just pumping nonstop before the New York session, okay? But when we break it all down, guys, the logic of it was they had the offers there. Now, you may have heard me talk about this, okay? That if the offers are in, see this area here, if it's nice and pink, it tells you that people are actively coming to the book and they want to sell, okay? And I've got a question on X about when prices are rising, when prices are dropping and what have you. Look, to simplify it, when you see that there's a lot of people up here that are looking to sell, okay? 111,000. And we go up 1 million at 110,500. And then we just got 10 million at 110,888. What you got to understand is, someone said to me, but what about when it comes to the cycle of when prices are going down? Well, you've got to remember, look at the pockets that are doing that. For every time price goes down with Bitcoin, okay, there are bigger pockets picking it up. Because you can't buy without no one selling. Remember, this is the futures markets as such, okay? There will always be a supply. There will always be someone that's prepared to buy and sell. Don't bother yourself with the idea of, oh, hold on a second, Tino. How is it possible that they were able to keep on buying and buying and buying and buying and buying? Well, look, they've just simply completely come back to the whole range. Look at it from the perspective of the daily time frame and say to yourself, look at it. All this drop to the downside, and they just bring it all the way back up. It just doesn't stop because there's always someone prepared to buy and someone prepared to sell. In other words, there will always be a supply on either side. The market will never run out, okay? Now, remember, this is futures trading, okay? This is speculating the idea of Bitcoin's price. It's not got a representation of the supply of Bitcoin because ultimately the Bitcoin supply is just moving back and forth. You know, what causes price to really move? The supply is there. You know, it's just going from one wallet to the next. If it's not going into an exchange, it's going into a wallet. But equally, the amount of Bitcoin that's going into exchanges is the same as the amount of Bitcoin going into wallets. And because people's opinion of Bitcoin changes so frequently, that's where you then come to the futures markets and say to yourself, well, hold on a second. Why is the future market moving so aggressively? Isn't this a representation of Bitcoin's price? Isn't Bitcoin priced at this price right now? Technically, yes. But what you've got to understand is when they're buying the Bitcoin, which is when it's dropping, that Bitcoin that's getting sold on exchanges is being picked up. Same way it's being sold back and they move price back up again. So when you're trying to navigate the idea of where Bitcoin's likely to go next, and you're trying to work out, hold on a second, we've got a supply of Bitcoin. I mean, you've got the new Japanese hotel group that wants to buy $5 billion worth of Bitcoin. You've got Michael Saylor buying more Bitcoin. Why isn't Bitcoin at the price that it should be at? In other words, why is it not at $300,000? Why is it not at $1 million? Bitcoin should have hit 100,000 3 years ago. Okay, it's a little bit delayed, and I always say that Bitcoin is last to move, but that's taking the piss, man. You know, you got your ETF, and that's stacking up quite nicely. Let's just have a look at Bitcoin right now on the ETF. Look, that's where your supply is going, okay? Currently sat, it's not an all-time high, but it was at 664 once. But it's sat at the 663,000. Not really got that much activity going off. They have deposit. Look, you got a few deposits of BlackRock going into Coinbase Prime right now. So it's nothing to be too concerned about. But optimism across the board is really good for Bitcoin. But I am going to warn you about something, okay? And this is just to put it into perspective on awareness of what's going on, okay? The CPI data that's coming out this week on Wednesday, all right? Usually what happens is the market's either going to float to the upside, it's just going to keep on moving up, and it's going to create the illusion that the market is going to be rallying to the upside. Everything is all good, okay? Just be very mindful that in tomorrow's trading day, we're going to know about the Chinese deal. That's probably going to be bringing prices of assets to the upside, okay? But by the time we get to the CPI data, what you've got to be careful of is if Bitcoin moves up from here and any further above until Wednesday, I personally would consider taking something off the table. Take some profits, okay? Because you've got to look at it like this. If the CPI data comes in at 2.5%, this is what you're dealing with. The euro will shoot back up. Why? Because the expectation of cutting the rates will be diminished. The inflation's gone up. They're not going to cut the rates. Gold will equally balance out and probably not really do that much of a move, but investors will still seek the safe haven of gold. Remember, gold goes up in one of two ways. Well, three, but we're going to focus on two. The first way is safe havens. They're concerned about wars and tensions overseas, whatever it is, okay? Second is the expectation of interest rates being cut. Well, if the data comes out on Wednesday and it shows 2.5%, there's a good chance they're not going to cut the rates. Gold's price will actually start to come down until investors do start to get the idea that they are going to cut the rates. If Trump's calling for 100 basis points cuts, it means that the Fed's not cutting. So why are traders betting for the idea we're going to get 2 rate cuts this year? It doesn't make sense, does it? The data to come out on Wednesday, if it does come in at 2.5%, we've got a little bit of a problem, which means that if Bitcoin does make the move from now further up, okay, please take something. Why? Because what will happen is the market, in principle, will price it in. So if Bitcoin were to just keep on going to the upside and we clear out an all-time high from now going into the CPI data, okay, which is very unlikely, but let's just make the assumption that that's the case. The second the CPI data comes out, they will pull it back so aggressively. It might come all the way back down towards the 100K mark. It might even just come back into a range. It's only on the assumption that it does keep on going higher from this point. But what I'm trying to take away for you, what I'm trying to get you to understand is that you'll be so fixated on the excitement that Bitcoin is going up and up and up. Just take something off the table. Just do something about it. Leave your runners, but take off some risk so that you're not losing profit. If you're a futures trader, take profit. Because once the CPI data comes out, we're going to know exactly where we stand. Then it would make sense as to why these dudes right here are piling on the Bitcoin. Look. 2 million at 105,750, 28 million at 105,900. And then we go up a bit more. We got 32 million at 106. And then we go up a bit more. We got another 28 million, right? 25 million. There you go. 25 million at 106,400. And then 17 million at 106,964. Go up a bit more. Another 17 million at 107,000. Yeah, on the nose as such. So you can appreciate these guys are coming in right now to try and buy Bitcoin. They're trying to get on the bid side. So this could be an expectation that Bitcoin's price is going to slump, okay? Now, Bitcoin might not move up anymore. It could just go sideways from now going into the CPI data, okay? But the CPI data will give everyone a reason to buy it, all right? What we would like to see is Bitcoin being the hedge against inflation. What is NASDAQ doing? What is going on? NASDAQ, what are you doing? Okay, Trump said something. Hold on. Trump has said something. Look at that. It's been a horrible day to trade NASDAQ. Let me show you what I did today. So here's the chart. I'll show you the chart. These are my entries. I'm just going to break it down for you to help you understand it. And if you can zoom in, it's just, I've reset my account, withdrew my money, started again with around 4.5K, 5K. No, 4.5K. We only made $652, but I can't trade these environments with size, quite frankly. But looking at it, this is where my entries were. So I traded earlier on a few contracts down here, all right? And the reason for that range right there was because it was trading the midpoint of the range, okay? So we were effectively at these lows, saw vector candles up here. There's a red vector candle right there on the NASDAQ. And I traded back into that logic right there, okay? And Platinum members, if you watch the weekly review, it was literally a textbook play. We just go into the 1 minute time frame to put into perspective for you. So it was this play right here. See that red vector candle? Yeah? So I took the high and the low right there. And this is where my entries were. So if I show you the entries, that's where that was inside of this range here. Okay. Trading back up into the red vector candle right there. And that was the logic right there. There's the red vector candle traded back up into that range. Happy days. You can find these. Okay. Look, notice how it's below the midpoint, trading through it. Platinum members, what do we say about it? Breaking through the midpoint with a vector candle. That I was in the trade beforehand because I saw the structure, the red vector candle, climatic volume, stopping volume candle. It's not just this line across the chart. It's understanding the behavior of the candlesticks and the order flow. Of course, I did have this bad boy up here. So there was that logic going into it. But fundamentally, I was trading back up into the red vector candle. And when you find these instances with the NASDAQ, she always ends up going back into it. And today was a horrible day for it. Look at this chop fest. It was disgusting. Okay. But traded that logic. Happy days. And NASDAQ does this all the time. It does it all the bloody time. Like, even look at this one here. Very sharp, short move, but dropped down. They came straight back up into it. So it's an easy strategy to deploy, but you've got to be quick. And today it was horrible price action. It really was. I'm surprised I actually made anything today with regards to the NASDAQ. But nonetheless, we exploited the move. So I'm really happy with that. And Bitcoin kind of did the same thing as well here. It did it here. If you were to take the high and the low. So we go from this range right here. No, it wasn't that. Sorry. It was from this low here. That's what we were looking for. Didn't quite get the drop fully, but principally they came down. Tap, reversal to the upside. It's not always going to hit that point, but again, you've got to take the trade to know if it's going to work or not. Okay. Any questions, guys? Any questions? Tino, USD JPY will pump if no rate cut. Well, dollar assets will actually go down if they don't cut the rates, because it means that the yield on the dollar is going to be higher. But listen, this is what you've got to look out for. Even if they say we're not going to cut the rates, all right, investors will still go to safe havens, because your dollar right now, even though the rates are high, okay, no one's going into dollar. Its purchasing power is shocking. It's too expensive to buy dollars, okay? So they have to go elsewhere. And that's what I mean about the data right now is painting a different picture. It's painting the idea that if the interest rates stay higher for longer, that means the yield on the dollar is going to be more lucrative. That naturally means investors will go into dollars. But why am I going to go into an asset that's costing me nearly 4.5%, between 4 and 4.25, 4.5% to borrow? Why would I do that when I can go to the euro and pick it up for 2.14%? And then I can put my euros to work. I can then sell my euros and go into dollar. That's the frustrating thing as to why Trump wants them to cut the rates, because people are going into euro right now, taking advantage of it being so cheap to borrow, and then they'll get those euros, convert them over to dollars, and then they'll put those dollars to work, which is why you've seen today the euro, it made a move to the downside, but they didn't last too long on that logic. What is going on? Yeah, so we projected this move to the downside with the euro, so I expected euro to come down today, off the back of the idea that the trade deal in China was going to then lead investors to come out of safe havens. Well, they marked it down. They came down to one of the TPs, the psychological low. Didn't quite get the one spot 13712, which is what I wanted. But they initially came down and cleared just so close towards it. but they came all the way down and just attacked the psychological range, but they simply came straight back up again. So that shows you that investors are still short term with their expectation of the value of the dollar. They're taking advantage of a strong euro, buy up some dollars. You saw the stock market rally this morning, then they pulled it back. Chinese talks extended till tomorrow. Euro will go sideways till then. Yeah? Does that make sense? Tina, do you have a strategy on the hybrid system regarding range daily high, range daily low reversal, specifically on Bitcoin? Usually it reverses. Yes, I do have a strategy on that. And it's something you got to understand. The range daily high, range daily low really does work well in Forex. It works amazingly in Forex because there's only so much that perceived value can be exercised for before it actually then starts to trigger other people's perception of value. In other words, how low can the dollar go until it gets someone's attention to really grab a ton load of it off the back of a strong euro that will always be fluctuating? People buy and sell Bitcoin because, oh my God, it's a supply, or, oh my God, Michael Saylor's bought this amount of Bitcoin, or, oh my God, Paraguay wants to do this. Obviously, that's fake, but you get the idea. Trump's going to be authorizing a treasury for Bitcoin. People buy Bitcoin, in my opinion, okay? People buy Bitcoin purely circumstantial. That's all it is. They're not buying Bitcoin because they're like, ah, man, screw the dollar, which is what they should be doing it for. But if they were buying Bitcoin for that principle, Bitcoin would never go down. They wouldn't. It would never go down because they clearly understand, why would I have any dollars in my pocket when I can just get myself some Bitcoin? It doesn't make sense to be in dollars. It only makes sense to be in Bitcoin. But because people have different opinions of Bitcoin, different players are playing Bitcoin, crypto players that you want to play Bitcoin ain't playing Bitcoin the way you would want them to play it. So it's one of those ones. Tina, what data does Jerome need to cut the rates in July? What needs to happen? 2%. I'll tell you what, if the data comes out on Wednesday and it's 2%, that'll be a fake reading. That would be a fake reading. There ain't no way that inflation is going to come down right now. There ain't no way. And I will be shocked if it does. If it comes in at 2%, ladies and gentlemen, you would literally need to sell your lungs to just get as much capital as you want, because that would then encourage the Fed pivot. Markets would just explode. They would explode to the upside. I don't think they'll do that. Right. So how many of you are everything is circumstantial? Yeah, of course it is. Everything is speculation. What do you think it is? You know, the game is speculation. When Walmart accepts Bitcoin, will it be too late for big profits with Bitcoin? No, not at all. Trump basically said that he won't sell his Tesla and keep Starlink. Okay, anyway, that's irrelevant. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Fed's going to cut too late and too little. I don't think the Fed will cut too late. I don't think they will. They're waiting for something. If this big bill comes into play, okay, I think they will cut then. But if the bill doesn't come in, the Fed won't cut. The expectations of cutting the rates, they're not there. July, then September, the 54%. They ain't cutting it. And there's too many things that can happen in between that, ladies and gentlemen. In the meantime, Bitcoin just can keep on flying, okay? I've got questions here about the indicator. Listen, if you go on the Traders Reality website, you've got the homepage that shows you everything that you need to get onto the hybrid system. It's got a PDF as well on the homepage. Go and check that out. But if you want to become a platinum member and get set up similar to these ones, then of course, become a platinum member and you get part of a Discord as well, where the guys in there, they just trade like machines. They really do. I go there for my information. And that's true, honestly. The guys are absolutely brilliant in there when it comes to trading. But if you are new and you don't have the hybrid system, just go to the homepage and just follow the instructions on there, okay? Start off on there where you're going to be able to get the PDF and then, of course, install it, watch the videos. It's clicking MT4 sessions. You've got to click that, like it, favorite it, and add it to your chart because the hybrid system comes as 2 indicators as such, all right, if you want those MT4 sessions, all right? Cool. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, going into Asia tonight, there will be responses to Trump's comments that he's come out with. And if they know that the China-US trade deal hasn't really completed, well, they're just going to take that and be like, okay, let's just keep things as they are. But if you are in profits right now on Bitcoin, do something about it. Either run the risk of sharp reversals in Asia, or if it does keep on going, take something, leave runners in the chart, and I'll be tuning into you all tomorrow morning. All right? Mad love and respect, guys. Take care of yourselves. Peace.